In this video, we are going to learn about classes and objects in C++. By definition, an object is any real-world entity that has some properties and behaviors. An object is an instance of a class, which means that every object that we come across in real life belongs to some class. A class, on the other hand, is a collection of similar type of objects. For example, we can group together several students and create a class called student. Similarly, we can group together several animals and create a class called animal. It is a user-defined data type which holds both the data and functions together. A class is like a blueprint for its objects that defines what data and methods the objects of this class will have. For example, a car, a train, and a bike can be considered as real-life objects belonging to a common class vehicle because they share common properties including name, number of tires and speed, and common methods or behaviors such as start, stop, brake, and accelerate. In our programs, we can define a class using this syntax. First of all, we type the keyword class. Then we define the name of the class according to the rules for identifiers. Then inside a pair of curly braces, we mention the access specifier followed by a colon mark. And then we define all the member data and similarly member functions. These member data and member functions together are known as members of a class. We end the class definition with a semicolon. The data or variables inside a class are known as member data. And similarly, the functions or methods inside the class are known as member functions. Now the access specifier that we have just seen inside the class definition is actually a keyword that tells us about the visibility of the members of a class. There are three main types of access specifiers in our programs. First one is private. This is the default access specifiers for the members of a class. When a data member or a member function is defined as private, then it is accessible only from within the class and cannot be accessed from the outside world. Second access specifier is public. This means all the members can be accessed from outside the class as well. And third access specifier is protected. This means that the member data or member function can be accessed not only from within the class but is accessible by the derived classes also. Defining member functions of a class. There are two ways in which we can define the member functions of a class. Either we can define the member functions inside a class or we can use a better practice, which is to declare the member functions inside the class but write their definitions outside the class using a scope resolution operator. We are going to follow the second approach in our programs. The syntax for defining a member function outside the class is like this. We first mention the return type of the function followed by the class name. Then we put the scope resolution operator followed by the function name, and then we write the function body. Creating objects of a class. In order to access members of a class, we must create an object of the class. So, the syntax to declare an object of the class is like this. We first mention the class name, then we mention the object name according to the rules for identifiers and terminate this statement with a semicolon. Note that the space is reserved for a class in the memory only when an object of the class is created. We can also declare multiple objects of the same class by separating their names with a comma in a single line. Once we are done creating an object of the class, we can access the members of this class. To access the member data, we must type the object name followed by dot operator and then we mention the member data name and terminate this statement with a semicolon. Similarly, to access member functions, we have to mention object name followed by dot operator, then member function name, and then inside the parenthesis we can pass any argument if required. In this program, I am going to show you how to create a class and access its members. Suppose that I want to create a class named student having 3 data members including roll number, name and marks and 2 member functions including getData and showData. Here, getData is a member function that allows user to input values for roll number, name and marks, whereas showData member function is used to display the values received on the screen as output. So let us create this class in our program. So our first step is to define the class, and in order to do so we have to first specify the keyword class followed by the name of the class, which is student in this case. Then we put curly brackets. Now it's time to define the member data of the class. So member data in this case is roll number, name and marks, but we want to keep them as private. We should only be able to access them via member functions. So the access specifier here would be private. Now it's time to declare the variables. So first variable is roll number, which is an integer type value. Second variable is name, which is a character type array. Let's say the length is 20 characters including the null. And then we have float marks, because marks can be in decimal form also. Once we have defined the member data, it's time to define the member functions. And in this case we are not going to define the member functions inside the class, we will just declare them but define them outside the class. So we want to keep our member functions as public because they provide an interface for us to interact with the class and to access the data members, and that is why it is important to keep them as public. Okay, next is the declaration of the member functions. My member functions getData and showData actually only receive the values and display the values. They are not calculating anything, and hence the return type would be void. The name of the first member function is getData. There are no arguments as well. And similarly the second member function is showData, and the member function declaration is now over. Let's move on to the second step, which is the definition of member functions. And let's begin by typing the return type of the first function getData. After the return type we have to specify the class name. Then we put a scope resolution operator, and as soon as I have put it, you can see a list is displaying in front of me. And now I am going to select getData from here because that is the function that I am currently working on. And inside this function body I am going to display a few messages. My intention is to first get the roll number of the student, and in the next line I will type here C in roll number. Then comes name, enter name, and in the next line I will put here name, and similarly we have /n, enter marks, and then we type marks here. Okay, with this the member function definition for the first function getData is over. Now comes the second function, which is showData. So once again we are going to mention the return type followed by class name, then scope resolution operator, and select showData from here, and then type curly brackets. Now we will display here /n details of the student are, and once again /n. In the next line I want to type /n roll number equal to, or just put one colon mark, and here we will display roll number. Similarly /n name, and then here we will type name. Finally we have /n marks, and here marks. With this we complete the definition for the second member function also. In the second member function we are just displaying the values which we received in the first member function getData. Now coming to the final part, which is to create an object of the class. So in order to create the object we have to mention the class name followed by the object name. Let us say the object name is stu. Okay, now it's time to access the member functions using the object. So our first member function is get data. So we will type here stu dot get data, and then we will type stu dot show data. Just select it, put a semicolon, save your program, and let's run it. Note that private members cannot be accessed even through an object. They can only be accessed via member functions. So here comes my first message, which is enter roll number of the student. So roll number is, let's say, 10. Name is maybe Amit, and marks are 34.5. Enter. So as you can see, the first member function executed and then the second member function executed via the object of the class. Now suppose that instead of storing marks for only one subject, I want to store marks for 3 different subjects. Then in that case, I can create an array inside my class. So here, where I have mentioned float marks, I can convert this single variable into an array of 3 floating point type values. And now I will be making changes to both of the member functions as well, because earlier I was entering marks only for one subject, but now I want to enter marks for 3 different subjects. So here I will put one for loop, because I want to get marks for 3 different subjects and I want to repeat the same thing for 3 times. So loop would be the best choice. So I equal to 0, I less than 3, I plus plus. This is the index for the array. And now I am going to type here /n, enter marks for subject, and then I will mention I plus 1. This I value for the first time will be 0. So 0 plus 1 will be 1. So my first line will be enter marks for subject 1. And then I will create some space here, get the value from the user, marks I, semicolon. The next time this loop runs, I value will be 1, and here I will get enter marks for subject. 1 plus 1 will be 2, so enter marks for subject 2, and similarly the third time this loop runs, it will be enter marks for subject 3. So this is how I will be getting 3 statements, one after the other, asking for marks for 3 different subjects. Same thing I have to do inside the show data function. So here earlier I was displaying one statement for marks, but now I have to display marks for 3 different subjects. So let's make some change over here. Let us once again enter one for loop, I less than 3, I plus plus, and here I will be displaying marks of subject, and then I will display I plus 1 and then 1 colon mark, semicolon, and then I can display marks I. This is the basic concept of array that has been applied over here. And now let's execute this program once again to see what changes are made in the output. So enter roll number of the student. Let's say roll number is 1. Enter name. Suppose the name is Bob, and marks of subject 1 are 23.5, marks for subject 2 34.7, and marks for subject 3 17.4. Enter. So you can see details of the student are roll number is 1, name is Bob, and marks of the 3 different subjects are now displayed.